Cultural Affairs and all the great work that Dorothy does.
Good evening. I'm so pleased to see some live and in-person people, and I'm sure we will be having many on Zoom. And I think with the title of this series, we will get more and more as the semester goes on. It is quite a privilege that the Cultural Affairs is working with Dr. Walter Jan on the birds of Orange County, which of course are birds of the Northeast, but we love to think of them as just ours. I do have the schedule here. We have it on a poster as well as any size, and I think many of you may have gotten notices via email. Dr. Jan is a real treasure at this college. He was just talking about our late geology professor, Larry O'Brien, who also is a treasure, a legend. So we're lucky to have such talented people. We also have Monty Vacara, who is our botany professor, who has started many programs. He and I did a 5-course lecture series 2 years ago on cannabis, and now cannabis is really going quite well in our horticulture program. So thank you very much for coming. I hope you come again. Bring your friends and relatives, and please talk it up. If anybody has any questions, they can certainly direct it to cultural@sunyorange.edu. And let's get started. So thank you very much.
Hey, just turn this over. Hey, welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you for those who are joining us at home. Who are we welcoming? Well, this would be everybody. So the purpose of this was to open this up to all who are interested. So it's open to the community. It's open to OCCC students. Some students are taking a course where you can do an independent study and use some of these. There's one group that we wanted to maybe experiment with, but this is kind of experimental. So if anyone feels strongly about this and wants to work with me, that's fine. The students who enroll, they have access to online quizzes where they can test their identification skills, etc. And we then also thought, if any of you were interested in that, well, I mean, just here's a quiz, not saying we're not pushing that, I'm not encouraging, but because it's already made, this would be something I'd be welcome to invite you to. And the college has a non-credit program known as CAPE. However, it's never been incorporated into a program like this, like, oh, hey, let's just have a course materials for members of the community. So this would then be a trial run for that. So if anyone was, interested in that, let me know. I would, be happy to push for this. Also, just as we get started, if you're interested in birding, and hopefully over this semester, that's something, that if whatever interest you already have, hopefully we, make it stronger. There are so many excellent organizations in this, just absolutely wonderful place to bird. I just want to point out 2 of them that I happen to be involved in. And if you're interested in going on bird walks or going, more presentations, etc. So there is a wonderful protected wetland known as the Bashakill just over in Sullivan County, and the Bashakill Area Association helps to protect that. But there's an environmental center there where they do presentations. So if it's a great place to hike. There's all of these information, great birders who go there. One of the people who joined us, Marty Borko, was instrumental in establishing the production of this. So we are extremely grateful to him. There's also the Orange County Audubon Society. I'm on the board of both of these organizations. Great to see you. Once again, lots of presentations, etc. So if you're interested in birding or just, forming social groups with others interested in the same, both of these organizations are wonderful local things that would, love your, your company, your expertise, etc. Sure. Okay, so I'm lowering a shade. So in the future, you are welcome to come to Rally Room 128 and attend in person, as this fine audience is. You're welcome to attend on Zoom, as many of you are, and it's being recorded. And we'll work on, how we can get that to you if you're interested. Just, some days there are bad card days or bad, weather, and so we like you to always have, have the availability to access this. Can you reach that, Dorothy? Or? Okay. I'm sorry. Just give me a second. That's good. More. Jade's. Okay. So birds, we love them, but they're amazing for so many reasons. If you were to take the vertebrates that live on land, birds outnumber the mammals, the reptiles, and the amphibians combined. So as far as groups, they are certainly successful in that sense. But we worry about them because, as the song had established, since the 1950s, it seems we've lost a quarter of North America's birds, 1 in 4. Now, in 1950, global population was around 3 billion. It's now at 8. All right. And so if this past time period, with the habitat loss and other human impacts on the environment caused us to lose 1 in 4, clearly that trend isn't over. And so this great beautiful group, once again, the most common land vertebrates, they're in trouble. All right. So this is worth considering for that reason. Orange County is a wonderful, wonderful habitat that has such great diversity of birds. Not as many as you would find, say, in the tropics, but far more than you would find in more arid regions out west. Or if you were to go to the Caribbean and go to the Virgin Islands, for example, and go bird watching, you see beautiful birds, but nothing like the diversity that we have here. So this is a truly great place. And as we look around the world, this is more than just birds, obviously. So many species are confined to narrow areas. And as humans develop more and more land, as climate change is impacting more and more habitats, more and more species are impacted. Because birds are so wonderful, I would like to offer a series of presentations over 15 weeks that really looks at all of them in depth. All right, so starting off with a couple of introductory ones, like tonight, just feathers and flight, the color of feathers, the structure of feathers, and looking at that. Next week, how did birds become birds? All right, so if we were to go back, 130 million years, there were no birds, but there were some meat-eating dinosaurs that looked like or had some bird features. What changed? How did this group slowly become birds? So that's next week. And then the third week, we're going to talk about, birds over the course of their life. They have a life history from hatching to being a juvenile to courtship, etc., but focusing on the bald eagle. So rather than try to do all birds in one class, let's just focus on life history of the bald eagle. That would be week 3. And then after that, we start to look at different groups of birds, primarily the ones which we find in our area. So we'll go group by group. And here, just in this video, you can see we classify birds into orders. The birds themselves, we call that a biological class, class Aves. And then there's the chicken-like birds, which we call the order Galliforms. There are the parrots, which we call the order Psittaciforms. There are the woodpeckers, we call the order Picaforms. And then within that, there are families. And then within that, there are species. And so what I'd like to do over the course of the semester is just treat the bird groups one at a time and talk about these. Obviously, Orange County is a focus, but at the end of this course, we'll also be looking at the environmental problems that they face, because in each of these videos on the woodpeckers, there are woodpeckers which are endangered, there are woodpeckers which are presumed extinct. As you look at the hawks and the eagles, there are hawks which are endangered, there are hawks which are presumed extinct, etc. And so hopefully after going through group by group, we can then at the end of the 15 weeks start talking about environmental issues and tying all of this together. But starting with feathers, all right? Colors, all right? Feathers have such amazing colors. I'd like to talk about why and what makes the advantages of each. Um, Starting this, something I'll repeat. I do feel a little egotistical in starting this, and we have to be careful because when I start talking about colors, obviously I want to, look at this bird and say, "Oh, isn't this a pretty bird? Look at these brilliant colors. Let me tell you why it's colored this way." But as I will establish a little later, birds see color differently than we do. All right, we see red, blue, and green. Birds also see an ultraviolet. So when a bird sees another bird, it doesn't look the same. It might have patterns that we don't see. So it's a little egotistical of me to approach this and say, let me tell you why birds look like this, because the bird might actually have a slightly different appearance than what I am able to perceive. So I'm going to go through this, but once again, trying not to be egotistical. It's not about me. The bird cares about how it looks to other birds, its potential mates, its potential predators, et cetera. And it's not here to impress me. So what I think about the colors bird really, the bird's color really isn't the major point. Uh, First, there are lots of things which can give birds different colors. One is the pigment melanin. These are made by specific cells known as melanocytes. And these are vertebrate cells, all right? So fish have them. They develop from embryonic structures called neural crest cells that only vertebrates have. This is a vertebrate thing. It makes this brown to black pigment. Now, it makes brown to black pigment in human hair, in human skin, and also then in feathers, all right? So a lot of the browns, the blacks, the grays that we see, this is melanin. So here you can see that some birds could then change the concentration of this. So we have a brown-headed cowbird. It is melanin, which is responsible for both the black and the brown, just how much you're synthesizing as the feathers are produced. You can add iron and make this a little more reddish, etc. This can give us grays, okay? And so this is one of the primary aspects of bird coloration melanin. Now let me just kind of talk about white and black before we start getting into some of the different colors. What are the advantages of these different colors? Well, one of the things which has to get considered is how they reflect light and thus retain heat, all right? Because that's an issue with, birds, obviously. They don't want to be too cold. They don't want to be too hot. And they may be living in an area where it's dark. So for example, gulls are white. But I was recently in the Galapagos Islands where there's a lava gull. It's a dark gray in color because it hangs around volcanic rock, all right? And then a lot of the things that live up in the north, like snowy owls or snow geese, they may have a white pigmentation to blend in with the snow. So there's a number of reasons to be white or black, including camouflage. But one of the factors is light is reflected by white feathers and absorbed by black. So if it were summertime and you were wearing a black shirt, you would warm up faster because of the pigments in the black shirt absorbing more wavelengths of light. All right. And there is evidence that birds which tend to migrate farther tend to be lighter in color. This suggests, it's probably never just one factor which is determining, a bird's color. But if you're going to be flying for very long distances, overheating, if you were dark colored and absorbing more sunlight, might be a factor, so that there is an advantage to having a lighter pigmentation here.
And they so we don't.
I'm sorry, does anyone have a question? Otherwise, I might hit a mute.
I have a question.
Yes.
For feathers, what do we have to put into that factor, like the flamingos? The reason why they're pink is from the crustaceans they eat.
That is a great answer. Yes, we are starting with black and white, but there are certainly more colors out there. We will be getting to the carotenoids from diets and flamingos and other things. So that's a great observation. We'll be getting to that. Thank you for bringing that up. And so whether it be birds reflecting sunlight to stay cooler, or even some trees reflecting sunlight to stay cooler so that the inner bark does not heat up too much. There's an advantage to a light color. As I had mentioned, snow geese we do see in our area in winter, but then they go up to the tundra where they will spend their summers. And obviously, if you're surrounded by snow and ice, this would be camouflage, helping to protect you from predators, which very often are colored white as well. All right, so snowy owls and the foxes you would find in the Arctic also white, as we would see obviously in the polar bear. So there is an advantage to being having white feathers in some environments, and then the same would apply to black feathers. So potentially these birds can warm up faster, all right, because of the black colors, which would then allow them to absorb more heat. There are birds which we often see sunning themselves. So if you see cormorants, so the double-breasted cormorant is in the top image, or a turkey vulture in the second image, on a crisp autumn morning, you might see them extending their wings so that they can warm up. And notice that both of these are dark colored. And once again, the darker pigment of their feathers would allow them to warm up faster than they otherwise would. One of the things we often see is that white birds have black wingtips, all right? Now, one of the things I love about birding is that it is welcoming to you no matter what level you would like to study it. If you would just like to identify the neat birds which are visiting your feeder in your backyard, this is a great field for you. If you would like to get in some hardcore science, this is a great field for you. All right, so here I'm going to make a mention of probably a level of detail between these guys and the crows and the ravens that most of us wouldn't want to get into. But if a bird is flying, if it's got a combination of white and black feathers, that means that the heat absorption over the surface of a wing is going to change. Some areas of the wing are now going to be warmer than others, which will affect the way that air then flows over the wing. And as birds have evolved, the best way to be aerodynamic and to fly, conserving the most energy, there are lots of birds. You see this in the gulls, you see this in these storks, you saw it in the snow geese, in a video a second ago. Very often the wingtips are black, and those who have studied how heat travels over birds' wings have found that has an adaptive value. Also, I have read that the addition of melanin will strengthen it, and very often the feathers which are on the leading edges are getting a little more force from the wind, and just the strengthening of the feathers there could be another reason for finding the darker feathers there. So black feathers will allow them to warm up faster than they otherwise would, and we see that in other animals as well. Now, this is once again where at a certain point this gets into levels of thermodynamics, which I'm not sure that I'm 100% comfortable with, but I'll give you the best I can anyway. So this is a raven from the desert, which then raises the question, why on earth would you want to be a black raven living in a desert? Wouldn't that cause you to overheat? Well, I'll tell you what I have read. All right, and once again, we're starting to get into levels of thermodynamics where I would just encourage you to read more on your own. If you look at a crow or a raven's feathers, the outer portion definitely black, but at the very base it can be a little more whitish. All right, and if this bird then creates like a pocket of air, because the black is on the very surface, the hottest part of the bird is right where the sunlight hits its feathers. But in a desert, what it would like is for heat to leave its body. Heat will go from areas of hotter to cooler. And because this area of the feathers is heating up the area that's not their skin, but just above their skin. So now the surface of their feathers, which is above their skin, that's the hottest. All right, so that's going to create an airflow over it and now encourage heat to leave the body of the crow. So it can be a little bit more involved than just, white reflecting light, heat absorbing it. Where are the feathers doing that? Is there air beneath it, etc.? Yes.
That's the same reef that the desert people live in,
Mm-hmm.
wear loose, dark, black clothing
Mm-hmm.
in the desert. Right, so it must be the same principle.
Very interesting. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so that it's not, you have this really hot layer, that's a little removed from your body that's creating that air. Yeah, great. So there are blacks and there are whites, okay? And then there are more colors, all right? And as had been pointed out, one of the big groups of colors are what we call the carotenoids. Now I'm going to start off with plants here, all right? Because even though we want to talk about birds, the carotenoids are starting in things that do photosynthesis. So birds are getting it from plants. So there's this huge family of pigmented molecules. And these pigmented molecules, they are absorbing different wavelengths of light. Just lots of different molecules do interact with um, the wavelengths of the electromagnetic spectrum. So in other words, I do not want ultraviolet light to hit my skin on a sunny day because DNA absorbs UV light. All right. So that's just one of the things that DNA does. DNA doesn't absorb red light. DNA doesn't absorb green light, but it does absorb UV. All right. So that's why we want to protect ourselves from skin cancer. But then lots of other molecules will absorb some and reflect others. So if you absorb blue light and green, but you reflect orange, when I look at these things, it looks orange to me because orange is bouncing off that that fruit. When I look at green leaves, they are absorbing the red at one end of the spectrum, blue at the other, but they're reflecting green. So when I look at a green leaf, green light bounces off the leaf to my eye, and I say, oh, that looks green. And the same thing for our shirts. Your blue shirt is reflecting blue light into my eye, etc. So plants have a vested interest in absorbing the energy from the sun, and different molecules absorb different types of light. So plant leaves often have multiple colors, not just the green chlorophyll, but then also these carotenoids. So these are huge families of molecules, and now with autumn coming up, we see lots of these. Not only in the plants, but also in the algae. There's lots of different kinds of algae. There's green algae, there's brown algae, there's red algae, there's different types of golden brown algae. There are things called dinoflagellates, which are what give corals their brilliant colors. So there are carotenoid pigments in nature that photosynthetic organisms use. Plants eat a lot of these. So plants eat fruit, which can be red and yellow. All right. Plants can eat the small invertebrates like crayfish, which are feeding on the algae, which have the pink colors to them. And so therefore, these carotenoids are now in the digestive system of the bird. All right. And they're colorful. We see that. So if you were to dissect, and I teach a comparative anatomy class, so some of these are from there. So if you were to dissect a chicken, look at the fat of chicken, how brilliant yellow it is. Why? Because the bird eats plant stuff that has yellow carotenoids, and it can then incorporate it into its tissues. Look at the egg yolk of the developing eggs in this female chicken. Once again, chickens don't have genes that say make orange stuff. Instead, they take orange stuff from the food they've eaten and then distribute it throughout their body. So we can see that here. And they can do it as they develop feathers as well. So do birds have genes that say make a yellow feather? No, nor orange, nor red. What they do is they take things that they ate, all right, these carotenoids, and then incorporate them into the feathers that they are making. So the Baltimore Oriole is getting its orange from the pigments in its diet, as is the yellow goldfinch, as is the red cardinal, the scarlet tanager, etc. All right, so these are brilliant colors. Now, I'd like to start by talking about where the colors come from, but then talk about why the birds are red and yellow, which is a second question in just a few minutes. Okay, so a lot of the colors that we see in birds are coming from the carotenoids in the food they eat. Now, you would, in your question about flamingos, maybe the great observation. Not only do plants have pigments, but so do the algae. And so then all the little things in the water, which eat the algae, then get the pigments. And then a lot of birds then eat those aquatic invertebrates, things like krill, etc. And now all of a sudden they have all of these pinkish carotenoids, and they could excrete them, or they could incorporate them into their feathers. So flamingos would change their color if you fed them differently. Roseate spoonbills would change their color if you fed them differently, because once again, they don't have genes that say make pink feathers, but rather they eat pink things and incorporate them into the feathers as they eat. So here's the scarlet ibis, and you see the same thing there. Here you see the roseate spoonbill, and same thing there. Okay, so pinks and the reds and yellows and oranges. Those are possible colors. There are a couple more. So there's another way to be brown other than melanin. And that's something that the owls can do. So our livers make, our livers are one of the, among other things, many other things livers do, they break down red blood cells. Red blood cells have heme, from hemoglobin, that's a pigmented molecule in our blood, and then the liver turns it into bilirubin, which ends up giving the color to bile, and then ultimately, as it passes through your system, to urine and feces as well. So some of the colors we associate with the body of urine and feces of bile come from the breakdown products coming from the liver. Well, owls can do that, but instead incorporate some of those liver-produced pigments into feathers. So not only can melanin make you brown, but also owls can be brown for a different reason. As we take our survey through the different colors, obviously there's the fancy ones, like we'll start with blue, but what I'm about to say is also involves green as well. Okay. So how do birds make blue feathers? Well, to some degree, they don't. In that we have to now, there's different kinds of pigments. Some pigments are made by a pigment molecule. Like this is a blue shirt because a blue dye was added to it. All right. If you were to grind it up, you'd get a blue powder. If you were to take feathers from the scarlet tanager, ground them up, they would look red. There's a red pigment here. You grind up the feathers, it looks red. You take a bluebird's feathers, you grind it up, it looks brown. Can you extract a blue pigment from bluebirds or blue jays? Can you extract a green pigment from parrots? No. Why not? Because there's another way that you can get color, and that's structurally. Now, this is, confusing, but let's just give this our best shot anyway. Think of an oil bubble, all right? You think of an oil slick, you can see all these shiny iridescent colors coming off of it, all right? But it's just an oil bubble, a soap bubble, all right? Is there like a pink pigment in soap? Is there? No, very often it's just more or less transparent. But what happens is if you have a narrow bubble that has two layers of lipid molecules, light bounces off the top one, light bounces off the other one. And as light bounces off two different layers, they can interfere with each other and create the colors that we see that weren't really there. There's not, when you look at a soap bubble and all of the shiny colors that you can see on a soap bubble, they're not there. it's not like a red dye or a blue dye. It's the way that light is being refracted and different light wavelengths interfere with each other. Okay. So forgive me, I'm just going to mute someone I think who is on in the background. Okay. So blue feathers are blue because of the way that they are structurally arranged. So you have to look at where the pigments are held and how they're organized in space. All right, so it's the microscopic nanostructure of how the cells have organized this that gives the way that the light refracts. The same is true of green feathers and iridescent feathers that you would see more in hummingbirds. So there really isn't, blue pigment the way that we have blue dyes which make blue shirts. It's the way that light is coming off that. If you were to take that feather and grind it up, the powder would be brown. All right. So that's another way that birds can make feathers. They can make it structurally. Now, just because I think I put it here, did I not? Ah, all right. Okay, give me a second. I'll get to it. While I'm on it, I could have sworn I put it there. So I'm going to cheat a little bit because I knew I wanted to talk about feathers, but just while we're on the subject. All right. So you can make blue feathers, but you could then also do your skin and do the same thing. So what I just said applies to the blue-footed boobies just as and their skin just as much as it does to the bluebird feathers. So how does it get blue feet? Well, one is structurally, all right. So that if you took, I've been told that if you were to take its feet and to like kind of lightly bruise its tissue, that you'd change that nanostructure of its feet, and now the feet would look gray. However, it also depends on diet because they make pigment molecules that then they arrange a certain way. So if you change the microscopic arrangement, that will take away the blue color. But if you feed them differently so that they don't have the pigment molecules, then that would also make them look gray. So once again, fascinating. Birding is here if you're, just in it for a basic level. But if you want a really in-depth look at like why blue-footed booby, feet are blue, it's involved. Oh, that was Galapagos Islands, and I'm cheating a little bit, but while I was on the topic of blue, I figured I'd throw them in. Yes. Yes. Ooh, that's the next topic. Thank you so very much. Okay, so birds can have a variety of colors. Why? All right. Well, there's a lot of answers, and the great thing about science is I'm sure there's more stuff to figure out. So we could continue to investigate this and learn. Getting back to these guys. That's a pretty bird. All right, nice and pink. It's also eating well, right? It wouldn't be pink if it wasn't. So a female that is evaluating potential suitors can look at their color and get an idea of the health of the bird and say, I'm interested in you, I'm not interested in you. Now, that's obvious here because they're getting the pink coloration from the invertebrates that they're eating, but then that applies to scarlet tanagers. Once again, these are eating fruits. They are getting their pigments from fruits. The females get to look at these male birds, which are courting them, because very often in a lot of these species, like if you were to look at a scarlet tanager, females don't look like this. They're, if anything, they're a green, or actually like a greenish color. All right. Female goldfinches, duller than that. All right. Female cardinals, not as bright red as that. Female Baltimore Orioles. So to a large extent, why are these colors here? The males are showing the females, look how healthy I am. If I'm healthy enough to eat this well, to be this brightly colored, I'd probably be a good choice for the father of your offspring. I've probably got good genes. If I had bad genes, I probably wouldn't be able to eat this well. So there's more, to nature, as they evaluate each other. Getting back to the Galapagos blue-footed boobies here. They're both checking at each other out because there's investment on the female end, there's investment on the male end. If you're going to partner for all season, if you're going to partner for life, both individuals have a vested interest in choosing a partner that's going to help them pass on their genes. So the female is checking out the feet of the male. The male is checking out the feet of the female. And as they do their courtship dance, look, they're saying, look at my colorful parts. Essentially, see how well I've been eating. So there are, I'm maybe exaggerating a little bit. There are some reasons that birds are colorful that we don't quite know why, and so maybe they're just it's something that evolved, and maybe it doesn't have a good reason that we understand yet. But this is what's called an honest indicator. Their color is really saying something about their health and saying, look what kind of a parent of the next offspring I would be. So we see a lot of that. Once again, I know I'm supposed to focus on birds and local birds, but we'll add a couple of here. Let me, if you don't mind, just here. So you can not only have colorful feathers, you can have colorful other parts of your body as well. Turkeys certainly do. And so these male frigate birds are flashing this red coloration for their females. And once again, the females are flying over and they have a lot of males to choose from. And they're saying, you look healthy, you look less so, you look impressive. And so feathers can do this, but so can skin, as we would see in male turkeys. Here are male frigate birds. In our area, here's a neat bird called the common gallinule, where the forehead in both males and females actually becomes a bright red color. So it's a bright red beak. And then they have what's called a frontal shield, a thick area of keratin as well. So while I'm focusing on feathers, feet can be colorful, throat patches can be colorful, bills can be colorful, etc. Yes, you had a question.
So in a lot of birds, you can tell that what's female and what's male because of the different coloration. With the blue-footed booby, I don't see any.
Females were a little bigger, and if you look closely, yeah, because they're a little bit bigger, they eat a little bit differently. So their feet are actually bluer. So if you look at them, you'll notice there was a difference in the hue. The better, the more turquoise, that's the male. The darker blue, that was the female. So, well, not as obvious to us, but they can tell.
I have a question for
Yes.
the flamingos thing. How can we sexual dimorphism? They look exactly alike. Is there one that's brighter or a bit dull in color?
So fascinating
females?
question. Let me answer very quickly, because as I try to cover like a lot of topics on birds over the course of 15 weeks, that's actually a really good topic for courtship. So if you don't mind, let me just answer it this way very quickly. If you look at local birds, the one thing I'm struck up with the swans, you can tell the difference between a male mute swan and a female, but it's hard. You have to look hard. So for the most part, they kind of look the same. Same with Canada geese. So males and females Canada geese look the same. Male and female mute swans look the same. And your point on the flamingos, many other birds, the same as well. Look at ducks. Oh, I can tell a male from a female duck in most species very easily. Why? Well, some of the swans and the geese, they're likely to pair for life. Whereas the ducks, just this season, you're my partner this season, but next season, both partners, all bets are off. And also in the ducks, most males give very little care for the young, whereas in the geese and the swans, both parents are incubating the eggs, caring for the eggs. So the point is, I'd like to kick some of these questions off a little longer because it's more involved. It just doesn't seem to be about courtship. It seems to be, matched to different types of lifestyles, and why that might be is fascinating. But a couple other things about coloration. All right. I'm sorry. A little bit of a personal question. Have any of you ever been at like a party, a gathering, etc., and you say saw someone across the room that seemed interesting, seemed attractive, and you wanted to go and I don't know, get to know them better, ask their number, but right before you got there, you said, "Wait a minute, is this a member of my species?" Anybody? Okay, I don't know what parties you've been to, right? We have to extend the time. Well, so no, and so what I'm about to say sounds weird to us because if you see someone who looks human, they're likely human. Like not that long ago, there were Neanderthals, there were Homo erectus, there were other species in the genus Homo that weren't Homo sapiens, but there aren't now. So if you see someone that looks human, they're part of your species. But birds don't have that luxury. There's a whole lot of little brown sparrows. There's a whole lot of yellow warblers. So if it's mating season and you say, I'm in the mood to mate, how about you? At the last minute, you then have to ask, is it the right species? Because if it's not, what likely will happen is small differences in the chromosomes will mean that maybe the eggs won't hatch. Maybe they would hatch but not survive. And now you've wasted this reproductive energy. If you decide I'm going to dedicate myself to one partner this season or over the course of my life, I'm going to invest all of this energy in defending a nest against predators. I mean, some like the females are laying the eggs, they're carrying, so they're investing a great amount. But the male, like red-winged blackbirds, they're chasing away red-winged hawks or red-tailed hawks from the area. So these little birds are chasing away big predators, so there's a risk there as well. If you're doing all of this and you're not going to raise a family, well, then maybe you chose the partner poorly. So how can you tell? Because even though we humans, we can't confuse, there's only one of us. There's a lot of little warblers, but if you then look at the warblers, females know that some of the males look like that. Okay. And then some of the males look like that. All right. Plus they'll make different songs, but that'll be obviously other, talks as well. And so that's another thing that color is doing. It's not only advertising, hey, I'm healthy, but it's like, hey, I'm one of you. I'm in your group because we have the little patches of orange here on the wings and on the tail, as opposed to the other ones which have the yellow over here and not over there. Now, that's a great topic. Unfortunately, not for this time of year, all right? Because yellow-rumped warblers, oh, beautiful, beautiful birds. See? Well, you can see the yellow rump. But if I was saying, like, isn't it a beautiful bird? It really is, but not at this time of year, all right? Because a lot of the males will be very colored like this. That's a beautiful male yellow rump warbler, but that's in mating season, all right? And it's going to take all these bright colors on to impress the females. It's not mating season now. So the only thing that a bright color would do for this yellow rump warbler is make it more vulnerable to predation. So at this time of year, it's going to go into what's called eclipse plumage and say, I'm not going to be brightly colored and be more likely to be eaten. I'm not, attracting females does me no good until next spring. So I'm going to wait until next spring to take on these bright colors again. So that's one of the problems bird watching in autumn. What will be a striking bird come spring, a little less so. Another thing, green-winged teals, a bright reddish brown head, really easy to see. Look at that reddish brown head. That's what you'll see in springtime. Here you can see green on the wings, what's called the speculum, but the heads don't look like that. Once again, they're not trying to be showy at this time of year and attract a partner, and that would just make them easier to, find as for their predators. So a lot of the birds look a little duller here. So colors serve a number of reasons, and you can see it very seasonally as we can see here. As I mentioned, birds see color differently than us. So it is a little egotistical of me to say, let me tell you what I think of this bird's color, because the bird doesn't care. It cares how it looks to its potential bird partner, its potential predators, etc. And one of the things that birds can do is see an ultraviolet light. Now, this has happened before, a number of fish do as well. The way that we mammals have what's called trichromatic vision, or I'm sorry, my fault, we primates have trichromatic vision, is in the primate family tree, in the ancestor of the old world monkeys and the apes, there was a genetic accident where one gene that allowed eyes to see red and green got duplicated. So now there were two genes. And then over time, these two genes changed a little bit. So now there's two where there used to be one. And one became really good at seeing red light. One became really good at seeing green light. So I can see the difference between red and green, whereas like a deer can't. So a hunter that goes out in orange camouflage, the deer would see it as green, whereas we can see the difference between orange and green, and primates would. So look, you can see the difference between the red fruits and the green leaves. Most mammals don't see the difference between red and green. They look the same. So by duplicating the protein that detects light and having it change a little bit, you now get this new ability to see new colors. Well, birds have even done that more than we have. So they can also then see in ultraviolet as well. Now, not all birds. So most birds do. Some birds seem to have more than others. So like hawks seem not to do that. Ostriches seem not to do that. But then if sunlight hits a bird with its ultraviolet rays, the ultraviolet bounces off the bird's feathers and other birds pick that up. There might be patterns that we don't see. All right. So as I talk about bird colors, the way you might say, oh, this is a boring bird. It's just got one color. It might actually be much more involved than that. Okay. So just one other comment on colors, and then we'll kind of get more into structure. If you were to go to the tropics, one of the things that might hit you is, oh, these birds are just even more brilliantly colored than I'm used to seeing in Orange County. Why is that? What is color doing? So there's a bunch of things to say. One is maybe we're biased because the one that you took the picture of that you saw in the zoo that you really remember, that was the really colorful one. The tropics have lots of brown birds too. All right. In fact, I lived in Paraguay for a bit, and one group of birds there's an awful lot of birds that look like that. A lot of like duller yellows and grays and browns and a lot of browns, etc. So not all tropical birds are very colorful. All right. And so here's just, I made some paintings for when I was down there of the bird types that you would see there. So they're not all brightly, colored. So just to be honest, we have a bit of a bias on the colors. All right. Why the bright colors? Well, if you live here, that's an incredibly thick forest canopy. So not a lot of light is getting to the ground. So what are you going to find on the ground food-wise? Not as much. You're going to live in the trees. So if you're living on the ground like a sparrow would, feeding on seeds, well, you got dead leaves around. Like a color brown helps you camouflage. Whereas here, if you're going to be up more in the trees, then maybe green is better. So to me, a sparrow is dully colored, whereas that's brightly colored. That's what I would say. But brown and green are both colors. All right. So the sparrow is just brown because it lives in a brown environment, the ground. Whereas a lot of these that are going to live, more in the treetops, more of a green coloration. So that's why we might associate this more. I don't know if anyone's ever had this experience. I have. You can go insane. I come close to it. Trying to identify parrots in a tree above you. All right. Because you can't see them. You hear them. The tree has a gazillion parrots, but they're green. And you just stare with your binoculars and you're like, I have to be able to see this parrot. And you can't until they fly away. And then you're like, why can't I see that? So the green color seems very brightly colored to us, but it's just a nice camouflage elsewhere. Getting back to the question of essentially, just to summarize what I said a few minutes ago, who do you have sex with? All right, as far as if there's multiple species, to look at. So the ducks, for example, the females know that the male mallards have the bright green heads and the teals have the cinnamon heads, etc. But the tropics have more birds. So let's just, for example, hummingbirds. You can find one species of hummingbird in the eastern United States. So eastern North America, or the United States, one species of hummingbird. Ecuador has well over 100. And Ecuador is the size of Colorado. So if you're a hummingbird and you're asking, who can I have sex with? In the eastern United States, if it looks like a hummingbird, you're good. All right, there's only one species. But if you're in Ecuador, there's like 130 wrong choices. And so all of these coloration are even more important, all right, because there's all of these tanagers, there's all of these hummingbirds. So the same thing that I had said earlier, but in the tropics, it might apply even more. Okay. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and then wrap up and ask any questions, and talk about feathers again with structures. Now, another question would be, how did feathers come to be? And one of the fascinating questions is, we actually do know that some dinosaurs and some other things had feather-like structures. So that's fascinating. But that would be kind of a next week talk. So as you can see in the great blue heron here, or these here, obviously feathers can have different structures and doing different things. This is obviously not for flight, etc. Okay. So that when we think of flight feathers, perhaps a better way of saying it is what are called contour feathers. They have what's called a vein. I'm just spitting out a bunch of feather terms real quick. A vein is the fact that all of these parts are going to stick together and form a solid structure, a vein, as opposed to just being fluffy, independent things which aren't really interlocked together. So this is a veined feather. It's also what's called asymmetrical. So if you look at where the shaft is, here's the shaft. Can you notice that one side of the vein is really fat and the other side isn't? All right. That's what we see in flight. So if you're going to fly, you put the small part here facing the wind and the fat part is facing away. So when we look at fossils and we ask, could these fossils fly? They have feathers, but were they asymmetrical like that? If they were, if they've got a thin part and a fat part, we say, ooh, you were using that to fly. As opposed to if they're equal, maybe you're using it for courtship or something else. So here you can see that there's a central shaft known as a rachis, off of which then we have all of these interlocking barbules here. Now, there can be special feathers for the flight feathers. There can be special feathers on the tail. All right, we can develop, I'm just throwing this out. I have all these videos on my YouTube channel at Dr. Jan41. So if you wanted more terminology on feathers, then you certainly you could go there. So the contour feathers are the ones we probably think of most for flight, also the ones on the tail. But there are other kinds of feathers. So there are downy feathers, as you can see on those little, goslings for the Canada geese. And it would look like this under the microscope, where you don't see a big central shaft and a vein. It just, from its attachment point, just a lot of fluffy things. So obviously not for flight. All right, but it would be good for keeping warm. I mean, as it gets colder, I want to put on a sweater and another layer to protect me from this cold wind and get a layer of insulating air. But if I had fluffy stuff coming off of me, it would do essentially the same thing. Birds are warm-blooded, as am I. A lot of the mammals, they have fur. So, these downy feathers are doing something similar. So feathers do a whole bunch of things other than flight. They have roles in courtship, as I've mentioned. And here you can see downy feathers lacking those interlocking barbules here. Notice they don't all stick together the way we had seen. There are other types of feathers as well. So they're what are called semi-plumulose feathers here. All right, you can find them in different parts of the body, and you might find different ones. So, for example, the birds that don't fly, which are also the most primitive group, their feathers are actually a little bit different from the feathers you find in other groups like ostriches, rheas, and emus, etc. Then some feathers really don't have much in the way of barbules at all. They're just kind of these straight, long filaments. If you looked at this bird, it looks like it have eyelashes, but those are modified feathers. So there's different types of feathers structurally. All right, and once again, I have some videos on this. So here, notice how asymmetrical the flight feathers are. So that's narrow as opposed to the fat side of the rachis. Here you can see, look how narrow that is, much wider there. And so under the microscope, here's the shaft here, and here you can see the interlocking barbules. And that's why it stays together and forms this vein. Now, it's hard to keep feathers looking good All right, and so birds have a gland that other groups don't have. So look at what some of these birds are doing. They keep putting their bill to their tail, right where their tail feathers insert on the dorsal side of their back, and then they rub the rest of their body because there is a gland there. And actually, I like this picture here. Can you see how it sticks up here? So there's a gland right there called the preen gland, or the uropygial gland is its fancy name. But it's making oils which now the bird takes from the secreted oils there, and then it rubs over the rest of its feathers. Aquatic birds will do this even more because, among other things, the preen oil of aquatic birds has waterproofing to it. And so I talk about the kinds of glands it was. All right, so here are these flamingos. Notice they're doing a lot of it. But one of the things this can also do is the pink color came from the carotenoid pigments that they used when they made the feather. But they can add like a little more carotenoid on top, kind of like a touch-up. All right, so the feathers were already pink, but it's going to be exposed to ultraviolet light. It's going to get wear and tear, so it might fade a little bit. So their preen oil can actually include some carotenoids, which then they use to just kind of touch up the feathers. And once again, aquatic birds do this a lot. One group that would need to do it a lot are the ones which are going to dive. So here you see some pelicans diving. That's going to put a lot of force on the feathers. So as they preen, they're going to try to repair micro damage which has occurred, and the preen oils are going to help with that. Now, I'm going to just wrap up in a second, but preen oil can actually be different from in different groups. So if you're not an aquatic bird, maybe you don't need that. Maybe some birds don't even really use a preen gland. But for some, they can tell the difference between males and females on the basis of the components in the preen oil. So it could be antimicrobial and antifungal. It could have roles in courtship. It may do different. Things. So feathers are a defining group of things for these birds. Obviously, though, feathers aren't always great. So if you're a diving cormorant, all right, the bigger your flight feathers, the more the air bubbles are going to bring you to the surface. You want to dive after fish. And so on the Galapagos Islands, there is a flightless cormorant which has lost its flight feathers because, or just they're much reduced, because that would interfere with its lifestyle. A turkey vulture has lost the feathers on its head, because if you're going to be sticking your head into rotting meat all day, having feathers on your head is just going to get nasty and encourage disease, etc. So just as there are feathers, there may be reasons to lose them, and even there are humans have bred some featherless groups of chickens because it takes so much energy to pluck feathers off of chickens. That some people have found that helpful. So birds are just, amazing. And for those of you in this room, I have pictures from the Audubon newsletter that I helped to put out of the birds which are seen at the sanctuary, which is right up the road near Goshen. Just birding is wonderful, so wonderful that this is worth more than one talk. It's worth a series of talks looking at, all of these aspects of birds. And tonight I wanted to look at feathers and the color of feathers. We'll continue to present these in person, online, and record them. It's wonderful that you were able to come in person and online. We hope you can make future ones as well. Thank you so very much for coming. And if anyone has any questions or comments, by all means, feel free to walk around the room a little bit as well. Does anyone have any questions?
I have something to say.
Yes,
Uh,
TJ.
I was the one that left that comment on that one video.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you so very much. I'll have to check out that video. I apologize. I have a lot. I'll look for that comment. Which video was it?
The tropical bird one.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. I'll check out your comment. Thank you. Very kind of you to
I
leave
also
that.
I have a question.
Okay.
How you say the ultraviolet bounce off the feathers? Would that count for albino birds? Because I've seen pictures of birds being albino.
So There are white birds that simply choose to be white for reasons which we just mentioned. But in all groups of animals, whether this be deer or humans or birds, if you have a mutation, so there's a gene that says make melanin, which is your brown pigment. So there are enzymes like tyrosinase. But if you have a mutation in that gene, you can't make the pigment or the precursor of the pigment. So now, while other members of your species have this coloration, you lack that. You have less, or you have white and you have pinker skin. So that really wouldn't be something that is selected for at first. But the way that natural selection works is if you have a new mutation, who knows? Maybe it turns out there's an advantage to that. So there might then, so for example, there are albino salamanders living in caves, et cetera, like that. So that would just at first be an accident. But if that accident did confer some sort of a benefit to the bird, then we would expect to see more of that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Bethany, you had a question?
What about birds that just have like patches of white on them? Like I noticed, I went to a zoo and I saw some peacocks that they weren't fully albino, but they just had some white patches on their feathers, like just patches of white feathers, that is.
Okay, so let me start with I don't know. And let me
Okay.
then get angrier with, I think I have it here.
And I also, I went to Ireland recently and I saw some pigeons that had some patches of white on them.
Oh, well, so there's all of this variation. Let me just start with this. One of the annoying things at this type of year, and if I were a better birder, I would say this is not annoying, it's challenging. But because I'm not the best birder I'd like to be, I'll say it's annoying. What is that bird? All right, well, it is a common yellowthroat. And you might say, oh, wait, that's not a common yellowthroat because they have, this big black mask. Yeah, but that's only the males, and that's only during breeding season. Well, you might say, oh, well, at least then they should have the yellow throat. Like juvenile males will have the yellow throat. Females will have the yellow throat. Yeah, but not the juvenile females. So if you're looking at color, especially at this time of year, there might be 4 colors out there. Or you associate the color of the breeding males, the color of like the adult, or adult or breeding males, the color of the adult females, but juvenile males could look different and juvenile females could look different. So getting back to your question, if I were to try to say, why might you have seen some, variant of, the pigeon, et cetera, not only do pigeons have a lot of variation in them just per se, then you've got gender differences, you've got age differences, and I'd have to look into that particular species before I'd try to say, this is the reason that it looks like that.
And
So-
also male peacocks, I saw it in. I don't, maybe also the females, but I can't remember. But I distinctly remember seeing male peacocks that had some patches of white feathers.
Huh. So one of the examples I used was of the males in eclipse plumage. So as birds transition, like they're going to molt the feathers that they currently have and then grow in new ones. So you might then see some birds do it all at once, some birds do it in patches, like some of their feathers at a time. So that might also be another reason that you might see patches here and there. Like, for example, we'll get to this in a couple of weeks. Like a bald eagle, we think of like the white head, the white tail. That's not till year 5. All right. So they'll have patchy white in year 1 to 2, and then they'll start to look white with a white head, but it's got a whole lot of brown in it. So the peacocks that you might have seen, they might have been on their way to looking like the adult peacocks you're used to, but still kind of in their teenage years. These are great questions.
Why would their feathers be white then?
So a couple of reasons. If you're going to be shiny and brightly colored, that might attract a predator. So you would only do that during mating season. So if it's not mating season, or if you're not old enough to mate, maybe making these, feathers which would attract predators, maybe that's, not necessarily in your best interest. So that would develop later. If you've just molted your feathers and you're growing in new ones, then there might be a period where you're still, making some of the pigments which will go in the feathers. So once again, I apologize. There's a number of potential reasons that I could think of, but I would have to look into the peacocks or the pigeons that you mentioned specifically to give you, here is the answer for that group. Good question.
Mr. Walter, I remember
Yes.
going to those Disney theme parks a lot.
Mhm.
What are those birds walking around the areas? The ones that have the hook beaks that go straight down.
There are a lot of ibises in Florida, if that's what you're thinking, which a curved bill. And there was there was a scarlet ibis in one of the videos.
Thank you, because
You're
I always
welcome.
wondered what they were.
I'll
I
bet
always wondered.
ibises, but I'm not quite sure. Does anyone in this room have any questions or anything that I could help you with? Yes.
The cardinal, the male cardinal is red,
Yes.
and the female cardinal is mostly brown,
Yes.
and what they eat makes the pigment.
Yes.
But isn't it also like a sexual thing, like the female, male, do they have different genes?
Right. So
Genes?
excellent. This is how complex it can get. So both of those statements are true. So the pigment, the red, is coming from what they eat. But then it's the genes and specifically the hormones like testosterone, which activate certain genes in one gender, but not the other gender, which say, hey, take that pigment, put it in the feather. So the female could be eating red stuff, but if her hormones aren't activating genes that say transport the red stuff into the feathers, she won't look as red. So both statements are true. Good question. Well, thank you so very much for coming. I'll take one or two more, and then I apologize. I actually have a class that starts up the road in 20 minutes, so I'm going to make a mad dash. So maybe two more questions. One online. What were you saying?
When are your office hours?
So for those of you who are enrolled in the class, it is in the information tab of the Brightspace. So I believe 11 to 12 tomorrow, 10 to 11 on Wednesday. So feel free to stop by then.
Also, does this becoming like an independent study, we still get like the credit hour for it, right?
You